Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on the Bite Size Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, John Boyd, joined now by my new permanent co-host, Ben Parker. Sir, pleasure to have you on. How you doing?
It's a privilege. Welcome back, everybody. It's a privilege for me to be here. I've enjoyed it, and now it's going to be a permanent thing. So I thank you very much, and let's do what we're all here to do. Let's talk NFL football, man.
Yes, sir. We got to get into it. I'm running on fumes a little bit, but I just had a big pile of my wife's spaghetti, so I should have enough energy to stay sharp here. Lee, thanks for being here, my man. Right away, injuries. Some of my teams are almost unfixable, like March Madness after second weekend. Yeah, I hear you, man. I am 0-2 myself, but that's all right. What I wanted to start with, because we've got a little bit of news just kind of in the general quarterback realm. Bryce Young benched after week 2 for Andy Dalton. And if you ask Adam Thielen, he feels like it's a Super Bowl team with Andy Dalton at the helm. He said that before the start of last season.
I missed that. Okay.
before Bryce was drafted on the Pat McAfee show. It was his first interview after he'd left the Vikings, and we often harken back to that and laugh. But Andy Dalton is going to be much more stable, I'm sure. A lot more experience operating behind pretty bad O-lines, and at least playing on time and doing a lot less of the backyard football stuff that Bryce defaults into, cleaner footwork, just kind of knows where the ball needs to go. Haven't seen his arm in action recently necessarily. He's kind of getting to that QB cliff type of age range where, the juice could all evaporate in a matter of weeks. You never really know at this point in his career, but are you surprised that it was this early into his tenure? 18 games, number 1 overall pick. It felt a little wild for me to see. Like it seems like something maybe you make the change at the bye or something. But what was your initial reaction to? Oh, Bryce is benched and they're announcing it.
I was surprised. I figured give him 1 month at least, right, into his second year. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. But thank you very much.
Yeah, right.
2 games is quick, but again, this general manager didn't bring him in, so it's not like they were, invested in him in the first place. So the biggest thing here is, though, he just looks so bad. He has looked so horribly awful. I get the privilege of watching the Carolina Panthers almost every week. They were so bad last year, we all thought it can't get any worse. Through 2 games, it's worse. I mean, it's just terrible. It is. It's not even low quarterback play. It is really, really, really bad, horrible, awful quarterback play. And I hate it for Bryce Young. I know he wants more than anything to kill it, and he's doing the opposite, and that's why he's out. I figure age or play, injury or play, he'll get a chance to do it again later this year. But for now, Andy Dalton's here, and he will bring stability. So,
yeah, David Tepper has absolutely ruined everything about that organization. Because I mean, everything starts from the top down in the NFL, and he's been disreputable as an owner. It's been, there was the whole incident. He threw a drink on a guy at a game last year. You come in, and with Bryce, in theory, he has better weapons around him than last season, but it's still an anemic offense.
Right.
There's O-line issues for sure, but on paper, you're like, okay, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, can we get something out of Jonathan Mingo? Like, I don't hate that group. Tommy Tremble's a nice piece.
Right.
but it's just not worked. And to this point, Dave Canales has not been able to pull what he did with Baker Mayfield, just kind of ironing out the kinks. Hasn't been able to pull that same thing with Bryce. And, again, Baker does have a cannon, but he's not the biggest guy. He gets a little bit of the happy feet. He likes to play a little backyard football and kind of revert to that at times. And that felt like a similar mold with Bryce, where it's like, yeah, he also has some limitations with his arm, but is Canales really the the driving force behind Baker's resurgence? Is he just one of those guys, one of those gurus who's going to come over and immediately change things? Hasn't been the case, and it doesn't look like he's the type of head coach to really rally the locker room either. Probably more of a whiteboard guy, if you know what I mean. So it's not been great, and I was surprised to see it that soon too. But honestly, it's kind of ballsy to pull the ripcord this soon. That you got to respect that a little bit, because there's a lot of guys who ride it out longer than they probably should have, and maybe they'd seen enough, and it'll behoove them to have moved on from him so soon. But the other piece of quarterback news I want to get to before we start recapping games really quick. So Tua officially now placed on IR. The headline reads he will miss at least 4 games. That feels conservative. I think he should miss all games going forward. That's not an unpopular opinion. It's not one I arrived at, just without hearing everyone else. All the former players say that as well. But even now, just when I think about that hit, and let alone seeing it live, it makes me sick to my stomach. There's a lot of us who played football who have had our bell rung, and if you've ever really had your bell rung that bad, to where, because that's actually what took me out of playing football actually in high school in my sophomore year. And I lived and breathed it. It's just like now. It's all I want to talk about is football. It's all I want to watch is football. And it's really hard to remove that part of yourself from, every other aspect of your life that can be affected by these traumatic brain injuries, is what they are at the end of the day. And that sounds more extreme than concussion. But that's what they are, especially because when you stack these on top of each other as well, that's when it really starts to get dangerous. You're hitting reset on your brain when you get hit that hard. I remember going to physical therapy after to work on regaining my balance, and things like that. I remember getting out to the game, I'll never forget, in Pine City, Minnesota. What I will never remember is the second half of the game and getting back to school in the locker room. And there used to be a lot of joviality to getting your bell rung. There was that commercial in like the 80s that would play.
Right.
The guy gets hit really hard. The trainers come out. Hey, where are you? Oh, I'm at the football game. All right, who am I? Well, you're the coach. Okay, who are you? Well, I'm Batman. There was all that, and but now you've really gotten to the facts of what this can do to you long term. It was 2 days after mine, and it was my first real documented one. I played backyard football growing up. I'm sure I had plenty. But my first real documented one, it was 2 days after that hit. My dad woke me up for dinner, and I said, "Who are you?"
Wow.
And that, as you can imagine, freaked him out just as much as it freaked me out to hear that story told to me a few days later. And when you look at Tua walking off the field, you can just see it in his eyes. They're glazed over. He doesn't know where he's at. He's 26 years old. He's the same age as I am, and he's already been to the mountaintop. He's won a national championship. He's played in a high-flying offense and been a starting quarterback in the NFL. Hey, man, you did it. Take the rest of your life. Go be a father. Go be a husband. Go pursue your other interests with your full capacity and be able to cherish those memories of you, quarterback at Alabama, you quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, instead of, like Herschel Walker, which with him, it's actually like either a bipolar or like a schizophrenia sort of mental illness thing that contributes, but I'm sure that the head injuries don't help. And he doesn't remember playing football very much. And that was such a big part of his life. Like, that's the craziest thing to think about, and especially too, as a 26-year-old, if he were to come back and play, he plays quarterback. Like, you're probably expecting him, if he's going to have a regular length career, to play till he's 35, 36. So you're going to go 10 years avoiding one more hit just like that, because again, when they stack on, they're only going to get exponentially worse and worse every concussion you get. And I didn't know anything about that again until, I was in physical therapy for mine. And then we all of a sudden, the Will Smith concussion movie comes out and we get so much more cognizant of it. You get the kind of the goofy extra padding preseason helmets and the practice helmets and the QB protection rules and the no helmet to helmet sort of thing. And which I think is all good. And we're moving in the right direction. But for him specifically, it's so much more dangerous to play the game of football than it is for the average pro player in the league right now. And that's the fact of it. It's nothing to do with, him not being tough enough. It's nothing to do with him, not having the mental fortitude to keep playing. It's removing yourself from that pride and saying, hey, I've got potentially 3/4 of my life left, 2/3 of my life left, that I want to make the most of. And so that if it's something that, he decides to come back, man, I really hope it's different and he's able to stay upright and he's able to do it. But, aside from that, I hope he doesn't. I don't know what your thoughts are on it. But again, that's just kind of the way I've been feeling about it. And it's been something to do that again, just like reliving that in my head just to see on TV makes me sick to my stomach.
No, and honestly, it's scary enough just to have these concussions at any age, but you can speak to it in a way that a lot of people can't, because a lot of us have been knocked out at some time or another, right? Concussed, knocked out completely. But it's the after effects that are really scary, and you suffering that at a young age, just like Tua is, that's the scary part. Because, what separates a guy from being a Troy Aikman or a Steve Young? We're like, yeah, I got knocked out lots of times in my career, but nobody ever saw me look like Tua looks, And then you have guys like Mike Webster, the old Steelers center, and then Junior Seau, who passed away and had the CTE. And then, who knows about the Aaron Hernandez of it all, right? So what separates, the
McMahon,
well,
Tommy Kramer.
Yes, exactly. Our bodies are all different, and there's something about Tua that doesn't look right when he takes these hits and walks off the field, and that's really scary. And you mentioned, man, we all learn at a certain age that we're not going to do this anymore. And some of us never get to do it, in any significant capacity, right? But Tua's at an age here where, man, he's got the money sitting right there, and he's playing pretty good when he's healthy. It's tough to walk away. It's so darn hard to walk away because you're like, what else am I going to do? What else am I going to do? Mm-hmm. It's so hard to walk away. But I hear you, man. Those after effects where you don't know who you are, or you don't know who your dad is, or who your kids are, or where you are, and you're dizzy and you're throwing up, and it's all you can do just to get back to practice the next week. That's really scary stuff. And as tough as it is to walk away from all of that, some players, and we're not seeing as many as we were 2 or 3 years ago, but some players decide, hey, I'd rather wonder what I'm going to do the rest of my life than not know who the heck I am or who my family is.
Yep, 100%. 100%. And I am going to turn the tone of this on a dime. And because you said throwing up, It reminded me of something I forgot to put in the run of show. Packers center Josh Myers threw up on the football in the middle of a game and had to snap it to Malik Willis. And it was a passing play.
Don't you just call timeout or something, man? My gosh.
Oh, my God. That's the most O-lineman thing I've ever heard of in my life. Oh, it was so funny. And Matt LaFleur's was quoted as, like, the ref came up to him and said, hey, like, you know, do you want me to take him out if that happens again? He goes, yeah, dude. Get him out of there if that happens. Are you kidding me? So I was gonna forget to bring that up if you didn't, on a much more somber note, bring up throwing up involuntarily. But you got to imagine he just had a big ass O-lineman breakfast, and just I was laughing so hard thinking about that. And then Willis had to tuck and run, so it must have got on his jersey. Unbelievable.
So
We've got another member of the bite-sized team waiting in the wings, and it might be a perfect time to bring him in, lift his spirits as we talk about a division rival of his shitting their pants on Monday Night Football. Niebler, how the heck are you? If the Giants can't win, maybe at least the Eagles can lose. What did you think of that late game execution or lack thereof from the Eagles? Just the play calling decisions from that 3rd and 3 with a minute 46 to go, going with the quick flat to Saquon. We're gonna talk a little bit about how maybe they could have managed that clock a little bit better to avoid the inevitable Kirk Cousins game-winning drive with no timeouts. But what did you think watching that game towards the end of Monday Night Football?
That 3rd and 3 really made my heart happy, seeing Butterfinger Snakequan drop the ball. That felt good. Other than that was just a really bad play call. Like, you have two dudes that squat probably the most in the entire NFL, just punch the ball 3 yards, and they can't do anything. And it's like you just run the clock out. On the flip side, like what I'm seeing from the Falcons that last drive, definitely a different tone than we saw in week 1. And even earlier in the game, like, they weren't able to move the ball like that well down the field. And then Kirk was like, okay, I'm Kirk Cousins. Like, I can do this. No, it was good. I don't like being last in the division. Kind of sucks. But it makes me happy that the Eagles and Cowboys are already starting off with a loss. So I will say that.
Yeah, that was
silver linings, baby.
Ben, what were your thoughts on that sort of vacuum of late game play calling, clock management, all kind of intertwined on the Eagles side, and then go ahead and speak to, kind of what you saw from the Falcons on that last drive as well?
Obviously, Saquon Barkley should have caught that pass, and if he does, we're probably not talking about any of this. All right, but players make mistakes; they drop passes. Ultimately,
Kev's probably getting flashbacks from Week 17 last year. The Minshew to the flat running back drop.
Sorry, real quick.
Sorry, go on.
Just got to stretch real quick.
Oh, nice.
Had to do it to Saquon real quick.
Sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
You got to run the football there. Over on the Manning podcast, both the Mannings and Matt Ryan were saying before the play even started that, hey, this is going to be a running play. So because it's not even about getting the first down, which, of course, they wanted to do, and if they had done it, the game's over, right? But even if you don't get the first down, if you run the football, you've taken off another, 40, 45 seconds less that the Falcons have to work with without a timeout. So they had to run the football there. They didn't do it. Oh, well. What really bothered me was the Falcons' possession where the Eagles were playing such soft defense. That really bothered the heck out of me. You can call it a prevent. You can call it soft. You can call it lack of CB discipline. I don't care what you call it. That was lame. That was terrible. I get it that there's good routes being run and Cousins is identifying and he's hitting. I get it. Listen, the Falcons had no business winning that game. And I really thought that not only the Eagles' decisions on when they had the ball close to the goal line set up the table for that. But the Eagles defense, man, play some real defense. Don't let them get off to that start and get off past midfield and 2 passes. And you still got almost a minute left to score a touchdown. That bothered me as well. That really saw kind of a prevent type of a defense.
I was going to say, because I play a lot of Madden, and how I would have gone about that situation is you just throw on a blitz prevent, and then you pinch it so that way the safeties aren't playing as deep, and then that easily could have prevented like everything that happened.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, and you're up 6, so the last thing you want to do is get beat all the way over the top. But at a certain point, I think they stopped playing to their personnel even. Like you've got your rookie cornerback, one of multiple rookie cornerbacks out there, starting on the right side, was drawing the Drake London matchup consistently in Quinion Mitchell. And instead of what I might have done is gone to 2-man in that situation. They went to cover 2,
right? Probably
3 snaps in a row. I don't know why you don't lean into Quinion's skill set. Darius Slay, man coverage at this age, questionable for sure. But I think you're doing a better service to Quinion going to 2-man because you're also not worried about the QB scramble. If you've got no eyes to the pocket, that's fine. You're not worried about him cutting one loose. When you go to just regular cover 2, Kirk Cousins sees that all the time. He's ready for it. And not only do they do that, but especially on that sail route to Darnell Mooney that crossed the 50 for them, you've got Quinion is squatting in the flat, doesn't get any depth, even though there's not really a flat route coming. Doesn't gain any depth. And you've also got, I think it was Blankenship was the half safety. He's like hugging the hash. You've got to, if you're going to go middle field open like that, sure, check for the post. There's no post coming. They have no timeouts. They need to stop the clock. They're running 7s, they're running sail, they're running corner routes, and you're hugging the hash and you let Darnell Mooney catch that. And not only did he catch it, he was able to catch it, fall down, get up, and sort of stupidly not get out of bounds at that point. But he was able to fight for even more yards after that. Like, not only the coverages you're calling, but the way they're being executed was really frustrating watching that game. And really quick, my take on the 3rd and 3, I think Kellen Moore galaxy brained it. And frankly, even if you don't get the first down and it stays a 3-point game, if you just run it twice, they might not have enough time to get back down the field to beat you and even tie it with a field goal anyway. I don't know how they overthought it, and that's another on the other side of the ball. They went away from their identity, and yeah, it was open. It looks really good on the whiteboard, Kellen. Very good, but you can just keep beating the shit out of this team. Why don't you do that? The game, and I love going for the jugular, for sure. But if you're going to throw that shit on 3rd and 3, go for it on 4th and 3. Because now you're dealing with a clock. You're going to leave that much time. Why don't you just go for it there? Maybe you try and run it. Whatever. At that point, anything to get the first down. Then you can go deep into your low red zone bag. And Kellen Moore, you'd think, would have something he feels confident in down there. I think at that point you still go for that 4th and 3, and because I've seen a lot of teams do this. The Chargers do this a lot. The Vikings over the course of my childhood did this all too often, particularly against the Brett Favre Packers. So many times they'd be up by 3 points. They'd drive down the field. They'd settle for a field goal and leave Brett Favre enough time to score a touchdown and lose by 1, or even just at the end of the second, like, I don't know. So there were a lot of frustrating things on the Eagles side, and I think that comes down to coaching. I think when you've got Nick CEO Irani not calling plays but still trying to dip his hand in both sides, you've got Vic Fangio, who, again, the Fangio style stuff is really, especially if you're not getting pressure with 4, is very exploitable. when he's not going to his cover one stuff and manning up and he feels the need to drop like that, it's very exploitable. And I think a lot more blame goes on Sirianni there if he does have any hand in the play calling than it does Kellen Moore, because if you're so tapped in with the culture, if you're a culture guy and you've got your mammoth offensive line and your mammoth quarterback and running back on a 3rd and 3 with a chance to put the game all the way away, if you're that culture guy, how about you veto the quick pass and just run it down their throat and execute and win the game? Take a page out of Week 1 Lions book. But that rant was long enough. That was a very frustrating end of the game for a lot of reasons. But hey, Falcons got one. What do you got, Keebs?
I mean, that's usually what happens when you have like the worst head coach in the NFC East and like a really mid quarterback and like a complete snake of a running back. Like, usually karma comes back to bite you in the butt. So
you're saying that that drop was karmatic?
Yeah. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I mean, what was he drafted? 2018, Saquon, right?
Yes.
However many years we had with him, that was his one thing. We all finger Saquon because he would just like drop passes. So
yeah,
kind of
some of the best. It's how some of the best are. Adrian Peterson was like that.
But I think that
all right.
I think Sirianni, like not even trolling, I think Sirianni's job should be on the hot seat tying into the end of last year.
Yeah, a lot of people thought it should have last year, which I thought was a little hair triggered, but I think we're seeing a lot of the same things continue. I think you're right. Thematic of Week 2 was a lot of upsets, a lot of significant upsets. Raiders over the Ravens was a big one. And something's going terribly wrong in Baltimore with their passing game, particularly on 3rd downs. They don't have a go-to on late 3rd downs. It's like they don't have. We talked a ton at length last week, Ben, you and I, about C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins, and even like Kirk at the height of his powers to Adam Thielen, who was really just that 3rd and 8, I'll get you 8.5. There's been a lot of receivers like that over the years, and they don't have that sort of connection. And it also doesn't feel like Lamar Jackson has that sort of feel, as much of a magician as he is in the pocket, buying time. And even from a play calling standpoint, they just don't have that dialed in right now. A lot of your weapons are really gadgety. We haven't seen Rashad Bateman break out. Zay Flowers, when you see him making plays, a lot of time it's on a deep crosser or a bubble screen. Not particularly dynamic routes. There's not a guy who's gonna hit the 7 route to the sideline and toe tap it and has that synced up with Lamar. Mark Andrews isn't what he used to be as a 3rd down threat or a red zone threat, even at that. Isaiah Likely's nice, but he's not that. At least he hasn't been to this point. And now you go to, we saw some good things from the running game for sure, but against the best teams and sometimes against some pretty middling teams, you're gonna have to convert 3rd and mediums, 3rd and longs through the air with passing design and timing and chemistry, and they haven't been able to do it. Hats off to the Raiders. Antonio Pierce, I think, really has that locker room kind of all on the same page. He's got that former player head coach thing going on where everybody's really bought in early on. And I like what they have going on, to be honest. They're able to survive with Minshew, who showed some flashes. And like even the difference between like Gardner Minshew having Devontae Adams and even Jacoby Myers to work in those same sort of situations. Lamar Jackson doesn't have a weapon of that caliber to make those plays when it matters most. Did either of you see this game live? Or did you have any other notes or takeaways from it before we move to the next little upset here, which I was pretty happy with?
Brock Bowers is a stud. I just gotta
He
say,
is.
Yes. Good call.
he's my.
Good call.
I mean, I'm biased because he's my fantasy tight end, but like, just coming out of college, I knew on a team where if Devontae's getting double teamed and another receiver can't necessarily get open, he's just going to throw it right to Bowers. And he had what, like 7 receptions for like 100 yards, something along those lines. When it comes to the Ravens, though, I feel like that's generally what happens when you try to convert a running back into a quarterback. It's just not the formula for success. But no, I want to say, again, it's probably a coaching issue this year. And I don't want to say that, but I feel like it's definitely something to do with defensive schemes. And then, like you said, not being able to convert third and long is a big issue. Not getting Derrick Henry involved enough. The constant switch between Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews also has to do, I feel like, a bit with consistency.
Yeah.
So I think when they get that figured out, it should be fine. But I just think they're underutilizing Henry and they're not using the right defensive schemes.
It still feels Greg Romany at a lot at the pivotal moments. It feels Greg Romany, and Todd Monken was supposed to come in and add certain elements to the passing game that Roman just wasn't necessarily too interested in. And you see how he's winning games with the Chargers right now. He's not too interested in. I think Herbert's thrown 40 passes over 2 games. He's just he doesn't really. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. And Monken, yeah, he's coming in to try and install those things, and it doesn't seem to have panned out to this point. Ben, we talked a lot about, or at least some about, the Bucs at the top of the show and the improvement we saw from Baker last year. Going into this year, man, he looks even more confident and more dialed in. What were your main takeaways from Bucs Lions, both really with Todd Bowles' defensive play calling, with a lot of injuries on that side of the ball, no Vita Vea for a lot of the game, doing what they did to, Wonder Boy Ben Johnson and the Detroit offense, as well as Baker kind of making those timely plays despite being sacked 5 times by just Aiden Hutchinson.
Hutchinson, good gosh, he's on fire right now. Hats off to him. So anyway,
he's unreal.
you're right.
He's first in pressure rate. He's first in total pressures. He's first in sacks. He's first in pass rush win rate. It's unreal. But go ahead.
It is unreal. But hats off to Baker. You mentioned it. He does look more confident than ever. This looks like the kind of confidence he had in college, because if you remember in college, he was rather a cocky kid. He was the kid planting the flag at the middle of I think the Ohio State field, if I remember correctly. More than once he had his moments. Success is bringing that confidence back. Now, how far will this take Tampa Bay? I don't know. Maybe it's one playoff win again and they're out. Ultimately, I've got more confidence in the Lions to do something long term here. But for right now, Bowles, Baker, the stability is there. They've got 3 wide receivers to throw the football to, and that doesn't count Trey Palmer. They've got the offensive line is looking decent. Rashad White's in there working. They've got a lot of pieces. We all kind of laughed, or I laughed anyway, when they're talking about running it back. I'm like, what you running back here? But, at least they are maintaining. So, you go into Detroit and you get a big win there. And Detroit doesn't look quite themselves yet this year either. They haven't yet hit their stride. They will. Jared Goff's been goffing around a little bit. This is 2 games now. We've seen Jared Goff kind of goofing around a little bit with the ball, throwing picks and making bad decisions. This will autocorrect for the Lions. But for right now, hats off to Tampa Bay for a huge win and for just being stable. That's exactly what they are. They are stable and dangerous to other teams.
Yeah. Get a little bit of Goff syrup in him, have him shake off that performance. But yeah, it was a rough one. He looked as bad as he's looked in a couple years, to be honest. Next one. This next game was. Yeah, exactly. This next game was after my own heart. Because this is a matchup between This is and it's after Keebler's own heart as well. This was a matchup between the former offensive play caller of the Minnesota Vikings and the former defensive play caller of the Minnesota Vikings, who was kind of a prick on his way out. And that's Clint Kubiak, son of Gary Kubiak. Clint Kubiak in the Saints offense scored on every offensive possession against Mike Zimmer in the Dallas defense. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to think about any of it. I was so positive that the Saints would win exactly 6 or 7 games in the preseason, and that's looking dicey because Derek Carr is a new person. This is not a Derek Carr we've seen for several seasons. This is not a Derek Carr we've seen since that one playoff berth where you were like, okay, he's kind of breaking out. This is a confident Derek Carr making a lot of fuck you throws that are getting there. They're getting there. That one he throws to Foster Moreau in the back of the end zone that he high points. Unreal ball placement. He's just been doing a lot of things that you didn't really see coming. And I guess Alvin Kamara still has all his juice. Didn't know that was going to look that way. The offensive line looks cohesive. The defense is flying around. Cowboys defense in particular looked really, really rough. And I think we got a scoregami out of this game, 44-19. I don't think we've had that score in NFL history. Election year Derek Carr might be a real thing.
DC.
That's a good one, Kev. Yeah, no, that one blew my mind. I couldn't believe what they were doing to him, just running up the score like that. But I don't know. We'll see how sustainable any of it is. Again, they're averaging 46 points a game through the first 2 weeks. Wasn't on my 2024 bingo card. That's all I'll say about that one. This is not one that I watched particularly closely until I went back and just kind of watched the highlights. This is one I really, really want to watch the all 22 of. I've been hip deep in Brian Flores all 22 for a piece I'm writing, but once I finish that, I think this is the next game I'm going to watch because I got to see what was going on. Kubiak just had to have been wide zoning him to death. Go ahead.
Let's not forget, though, I think Derek Carr, correct me if I'm wrong, has at least one season of throwing over 5,000 yards. So it's not like this is like unheard of from him. It's just I think he was stuck on a bad team with not as good of weapons. And now when healthy, you have a top 5 running back. You have Shaheed, who's been very good. Olave, who hasn't gotten many touches because he's usually getting double teamed, which is why it's open to Shaheed. I don't know, man. They're looking legit, and I was on the same wavelength as you. I think like anywhere from like 6 to 8 games for the Saints, but now it's looking like 15 to 17. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and what I meant too is just it's a version of Derek Carr we haven't seen for a few years, to the point where you thought that version may have been gone, like he may have already peaked and was kind of Andy Daltoning into his 30s. But he looked really sharp and has continued to. And speaking of quarterbacks who look ridiculously sharp, now to my favorite segment of the show this season. Gosh, Darnold.
On fire.
Oh, man, in a small sample size, he still looks incredible. Had one bozo interception, but we'll sweep it under the rug, man. So I'm going to get on my soapbox for like 2 minutes, and then I'll kick it to you guys. Kevin O'Connell's a top 5 play caller in this league. That's irrefutable. What he did with Dobbs and Mullins last season, cobbling it together, what he was able to get out of Kirk and getting him to be more aggressive, getting him to throw the alerts on plays when he's usually by the book. He's usually just memorizing my first read. he was hitting the alerts under Kevin O'Connell. Now you've got Sam Darnold doing the same thing, except kind of the opposite way. On that 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson, that was an alert up top. The first reads to Naylor on a crosser. You're throwing it out of your own end zone. And he just says, all right, I'm heaving this thing. And he does. And it's an unreal throw. And then you've got the Niners, and they hung in it somehow. Aaron Jones fumbles on the 1-yard line. That Darnold interception to the best linebacker of this generation was in the high red zone. We had so many opportunities to capitalize. If Aaron Jones punches that in, it's 27-7 against the 49ers. Doesn't. It's 20-7. They drive down, get it to 20-14. And that whole entire drive, all I'm picturing is the Vikings driving down the field, settling for a field goal, missing the field goal, and losing by 1. I couldn't get that out of my head for the final 9 minutes of regulation, and it didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen, the reason they even got into range for that field goal was one of the best throws I've seen in a while. It was a seam ball to Jalen Naylor from the Minnesota 45 that went about 20 yards on a line. And it was between 3 defenders. This is not a seam ball that you put in the breadbasket, like splitting cover 3. This is not a seam ball that you throw over the shoulder and out throw the deep defenders because he's got a step. This was a back shoulder hash line seam to Jalen Naylor to perfectly not only protect Naylor from the hit, but also protect the ball from any converging defenders. And it was on 3rd down on the most crucial situation against, one of the best teams in football that you're not supposed to beat, according to all the pundits, that you're not supposed to beat, according to Stephen A. Smith, who decided to scoff at the suggestion that the Vikings might be just fine given the rest of the roster. And he was very smug about it, and many were. And admittedly, I had him somewhere, I had 7 and 10 to 10 and 7. I wrote a prediction piece about that, and that was kind of my range. And I said, hey, they can very well win 10 games, but after 2 weeks, I don't know if I see one loss on the schedule. Them and the Saints might just be 17-0. Well, one of them will have to lose. Saints will be 16-1 when they play. But man, it's the offense under Darnold's been riveting, and that's the namesake of the segment. But the real meat of what's going on in Minnesota is Brian Flores' defense and what he's been able to do to opposing quarterbacks just to get a little bit of hesitation out of them. A lot of his coverages post-snap have been pretty static. He's running a lot of cover 2, but he's doing it out of 8 guys mugging the line of scrimmage and 4 dropping out. He's inverting cover 2 a ton and having the corners be your deep droppers and having these safeties who are maniacs, by the way, come and roam and rob, or he's having Josh Metellus, the safety, be his Tampa dropper instead of a slower linebacker and creating an advantage that way. There was a play on which Shanahan went to mesh over the top with 2 drags crossing each other. It's a real staple of that offense. And they had 7 guys mugging the line of scrimmage, and they just went to cover 2. But that meant that the hook defenders dropped under the mesh point of these 2 drags and took away the first 2 reads. So the angles they're getting to their zones from are messing with the passing windows and just throwing off the timing a tiny bit. And Brock Purdy is a timing guy. Cranked up the blitz rate to 51% on Brock. And they were generating pressure, but just what he was doing on the back end is simple, but not. And it just causes just enough hesitation. And the second and third level defenders on the Vikings rally and tackle like one of the best units in football. That's all I have to say about the Vikings. Niners are going to be fine. And they played a strong game. But let's face it, this is just two heavyweights going at it.
Right.
This is two contenders. Just going 12 rounds. This is what we all expected in the offseason. So, it's nothing crazy. It's nothing crazy. All right, let's zip through a few more. I'm sorry about that. This is probably has a little bit more national attention for sure. And then I think we'll get to one more after that, just because it's a team I really like. You guys tell me about Bengals Chiefs. Ben, I'll start with you. With your Chiefs, I think we're going to skip the Giants game. I'm not going to lie to you.
No, we have to get to it.
All right. Before we talk Bengals Chiefs, I'm going to do a teaser for the Giants game. The Giants are the first team since 1989 to score 3 touchdowns and allow 0 touchdowns and lose the game. Ben, take it away with Bengals Chiefs.
Oh wait, to rebuke that, Graham Geno pulled his hamstring chasing down a return kick on the first play of the game.
You did.
Anyway, unathletic fuck. Sorry, I hate Graham Geno really badly. But now we signed a kicker off, I think, like the Lions practice squad. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe Dave will be smart and actually have 2 kickers on the effing roster for once. That'd be Sorry, that's all I wanted to say. Also, Malik Neighbors is the best rookie in the class. Also, just want to put that out there as well.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, he looks. I like the way he looks a lot. That's a bright spot. Go ahead, Ben. What'd you see from your Chiefs in this one, and what is it about these Bengals that won't let you guys off easy?
This was a street fight. There's no question about it. I didn't expect that. I thought this Bengals team right now in week 2 just couldn't hold up to this Chiefs team right now in week 2 in Arrowhead. I was wrong. Bengals come in, and it's an absolute street fight, and KC is lucky to have won this game. They're good, but they were also lucky to have come out with this game. There's no question about it. The 2 things that always keep Cincinnati in these games against KC is, number 1, Joe Burrow. He's a quarterback who just won't back down. He always makes a play, and even though he'll make a bad play, like the fumble, he just keeps making plays. And, he's fantastic. But the other thing is Lou Anarumo, the DC for the Bengals. He always comes up with game plans. And, again, I don't know that I'd put in the top 3 of DCs, and the Bengals defense usually isn't in the top 5. But they're never bad. And they always come up with game plans against everybody that gives them a chance, and specifically against Kansas City. It's not always the same. It's built intelligently on what that Kansas City Chiefs team can do, and it just limits Patrick Mahomes. We see it every time. How often have we seen Mahomes tee off for 40 points or 35 points on Cincinnati? It's very rare. Usually it's a score just like this. So hats off to Lou Anarumo, the DC for the Bengals, who always comes in with a game plan that is going to slow down what Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes are going to try to do.
You know what's funny about this particular matchup too? I mean, when you speak to Lou Anarumo, I think the way he sort of operates now, he's not going to have consistent top 10 defenses necessarily. But he does get up for these kind of games. You know what I mean? He gets into the lab, and that is how Spags was for a long time. Before he really got, the last few years, before he really got all that personnel that he wanted in the building, before he got 5 linebackers he likes, and before he started getting all these 6th round corners that are going to be amazing as soon as they get a starting job. Before the personnel started to really match that energy he wants to bring and that personality he calls, it was kind of that way. He'd have middling defenses, and then he would just cook something diabolical up for playoff games or big rivalry matchups, all the way back to his Giants days. those weren't top 5 defenses consistently. They'd go 8-8 and then go on a Super Bowl run because he started calling crazy stuff to get one-on-ones for these pass rushers. I just think that's a really funny parallel, and it happening to the Chiefs. You can tell that whatever it is, like that chess match between he and Andy Reid is something that's really, really evenly matched, and it's fun to watch. That's another game I want to watch the tape on. Did you see much of drop 8 against like from that Bengals unit? I know they did that a ton to Patrick Mahomes, at least 2 years back when Burrow was healthy, and that was kind of one of the things he relied on a lot. But were they doing much of that? Did you notice anything goofy from the defensive side?
No, because they didn't have to. And even you go back to that playoff game 2 years ago, they really only did that drop 8 about 18%, 20% of that game. But because it was so different, and again, I think you used the word correctly, laboratory.
Yeah.
Because it was so different, everyone was like, wow, look at that. But they really didn't run it that much. They just ran it at the right times, and it was so effective. And you're right, every game.
Yeah.
He ain't got Reader no more on the defensive line. He ain't got Jesse Bates back there in the secondary anymore. I mean, it's not the same defense as what he had 2 years ago during the Super Bowl run. But again, he just keeps coming up with stuff. And I didn't get to watch every play of this game, so I don't know exactly what they were doing that was so magical. It wasn't drop 8, I know that, because this is a different Kansas City team than what they were playing 2 years ago. It just is. But anyway,
that's why I was wondering, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know exactly what he did, but he's mixing and matching very well. Tremendous job.
Oh yeah, and Ben, don't let anyone talk any shit to you about that DPI call. That should have been called. They made the right call.
I do have to say, before the season started, in my work chat, in the NFL chat, I said that the Bengals were going to finish last in that division. It's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know, making the playoffs. There's a lot of holes.
I had Ravens, Steelers, Browns, Bengals, and the Ravens aren't looking good either. I'll say that. The Steelers are looking fantastic. Even though they still don't have.
You know what? Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect. Final segment. Another very Steelers win. Is it 2006? The Bears are winning on punt blocks and 90 yards from their quarterback. The Steelers are grinding out games, giving up single-digit points. Is this 2006? What's going on, guys?
It might be, honestly. Fields looked a lot.
It really might.
Fields looked a lot better last game than he did week 1. I'll say that. But that Steelers defense is just overbearing. It's just no matter. I feel like Mike Tomlin could throw together a defense of 11 me's, and he could still somehow manage to win a football game. But having all the talent that they have on that defense, it's just constantly swarming. And I get they played the Broncos, right? It's the Broncos. My favorite quote out of that game was when they talked to Bo Nix, and they were like, run us through that interception. What happened? He was like, I dropped back and I threw the ball to the other team.
That's so elite.
So
that's
that was
so
fun.
Elite, honestly.
I was talking to Nick about it, and he was like, as long as you have a funny quarterback like that, they usually end up being pretty good once they go through those rookie mistakes. So maybe he's the future. We'll see. I'm still a Zach Wilson believer personally. If they just let him off the leash that the Jets let him on, and then just let him do his thing, I feel like that could be pretty successful. The Broncos just aren't good, man. But the Steelers did look very dominant, so it's good that a good team like that is still able to dominate a worse team like that in that kind of fashion.
Yeah, really well coached. Really well coached. Ben, what are your I know you got to get out of here pretty quick, but what are your overarching takes on the Steelers? Do you feel like given the weeks 1 and 2 matchups and taking that into account, how real do you feel this team is? Can they grind their way all the way back to a playoff spot if it is Fields they roll with, or even if it's Wilson back? Is this defense and is Is this defense good enough to really carry them that far, or do you think it tables off a little bit?
I expect it to table off, but it wouldn't surprise me if they scratched out a playoff spot, right? Because it's Tomlin, the defense is loaded, and Fields, while he's not ever hit what some of us thought he could be, he is capable. And right now he's working within his framework, and he can make some big plays. So it wouldn't surprise me if they scratch out a playoff spot. It does aggravate me a little bit, though, because the way NFL math works and the NFL schedule, we're watching teams like Seattle, 2-0, Pittsburgh, 2-0, play some of these weak schedules these first 2, 3, 4 weeks, and in some cases the entire year, whereas you've got teams like the Rams and the Ravens that are playing brutal matchups during the first couple of weeks. And so you get teams
Chiefs.
that are 0-2 that are better than the 2-0 teams, but because of the NFL scheduling, it's a lot more interesting that way for all of us. It's way more interesting. But it's not particularly fair, especially when you have some of these Titans playing each other for the first couple of weeks, and you got some weak sauce teams playing each other for the first couple of weeks. It's going to take some time to shake out. I figure Pittsburgh is competitive all year and maybe better than I thought, but do I actually see Pittsburgh doing damage in the playoffs? Not yet. Just not yet.
Yeah, I was just thinking that about the Chargers as well. They got worse teams on their schedule, and they said, well, we're not going to mess around. We're just going to run the shit out of the ball, get out of here with wins, don't get too cute,
That's it.
So similar thing, and that is a little – it's goofy the way that turns out. I mean, the Steelers don't play a divisional game until week 11, I want to say. 6 of their last 8 games are divisional games. And the other 2 are the Chiefs and someone else very good. Chiefs and Niners or something.
That's going to be a lot of injuries in those divisional matchups. I'll tell you that right now, especially week after week. That's just not. That's not going to be great for them. Just as like a foreshadow.
No, yeah, it's going to be rough. Anyway, Ben, we can get you out of here. Before we do, sir, let them know where else they can find you and your excellent work.
I appreciate the chance, but if you don't mind, I'm going to save that till next week. I've got 2 comments from listeners that I want to hit up real quick. Lee asked, do you blame the Panthers coach for Bryce Young's struggles? I personally don't. At the moment, I blame the GM for not putting a roster that really, truly supports a young quarterback. And then I also blame the Panthers organization, if you will, for shoving Bryce Young right into the heat of the action so quickly. Maybe give him some time. That's why I really would put the blame more than the coach. And then Nate said that the Bears are still going to win the Super Bowl, even though they suck so far through 2 weeks. Thank you, Nate.
I love that. I love that second shout out in particular. Sometimes Nate just does drive-bys like that. He'll just pop into the show and hit you with a drive-by. I must have just glossed over it. Oh, yeah, because it was right before. Yeah, it was right before this one. This is the one I saw. And, that's funny. They do look terrible. Ryan Poles just likes his toys, doesn't he? He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to build through the trenches. He just likes shiny objects. What's his deal? Ooh, Roma Dunze. Ooh, a 4th for Keenan Allen. O-line, don't care. Interior D-line, don't care. No, that's so fun. That'll be fun. All right, well, sounds good, brother. At the very least, you guys can catch Ben Parker here every Tuesday night, talking ball. Sports and Money KC on YouTube. Box Score Network. What's it called?
That's it. Yep.
Is it my close?
Score Network. We've
the
got
other
a
thing
whole host of podcasts. Yep.
Box Score Network. Yes. Yep. Check him out. Subscribe over there as well. And keep up with Ben's stuff. Ben, thanks again for joining me. Keebs, if you'd like, we can close the show out on your Giants.
Okay. Yeah, I just had
all right. See you.
I just had 2 quick comments to also address. Lee, sorry I didn't get to it before. He said, Keeb, are we going to lose Dable this year? I don't think so. And my reasoning for it is that this is not Dable and Shane's quarterback. This is Gettleman's quarterback that he drafted with Mara under the advice of Eli, also, who was high on him because they had like similar play styles with Jones coming out of college. I think as long as, God forbid, Daniel Jones doesn't get injured and we can get off of his contract after this season because we don't owe him any more guaranteed money, I think looking for maybe like Quinn, how do you pronounce his last name? Quinn Ewers, something like that, out of Texas.
Ewers, yeah.
Looking for a guy like him. I don't like Carson Beck at all. I'll just straight up say that. I don't think that his game is really going to translate well to the NFL. So if we land with a top 3 pick, the Panthers are. If the Panthers decide they're not in the room for a quarterback, but obviously they look like they are, I would say he would be a good option, and then Dable and Shane can actually develop him and like mold him into their quarterback, and then if he's not successful, then move on from him. I do have to say though, I know it was against the Commanders, and Daniel Jones is now 5-2-1 against the Commanders, even though he was 5-1-1. He looked like a competent quarterback for anyone that watched the game, and that loss was not on him at all. It was the fact that we didn't have a kicker, and then obviously the Malik Neighbors drop pass had something to do with it. But I might have to backtrack on some of what I said in that one episode about the Giants' schedule. Lee addressing that comment. I don't think they want to wait for Manning. Like, obviously the storybook is there. Like, now we have like an athletic Manning going to play for the Giants. Maybe lead them to a Super Bowl. Who knows? I don't know. He looked really good against a really trash team in his last game. I will say that. But regardless, I'm ready to move on from Jones, even though I'll always have like a soft spot in my heart for him because I know that he wasn't dealt the best hand when it came to O-line, weapons, everything like that. So I wouldn't put the blame entirely on him. But sorry for making this a long-winded rant. I saw this one thing where it's like the Giants should trade a conditional second and a 3rd round pick for Bryce Young and see if Dable and Shane want to mold him into their quarterback. I know. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it as long, like, it would be hindsight at that point. But if we're, like, let's say we don't get a top 5 pick somehow. We're going to, but let's say somehow. Then we miss out on a quarterback, and now we have a good developmental project that looked good coming out of college. Again, another quarterback that hasn't been out the best hand, but on the Giants, we have a revamped O-line that's looked amazing. We have Neighbors that he can develop chemistry with while they're both so young. Wandale, Singletary's look pretty good, I gotta say. And the defenses look really good too. Especially, I'm a big fan of Drew Phillips. If you guys don't know who that is, that's one of our rookie nickel backs. He's looked really good. The framework is there for the Giants. Just a corner to put with Banks, and then a quarterback.
Banks looks good.
Yeah, Banks. I think he changed his name from Deontay to just Tay, which is kind of funny. But he looks good. Newbin looked really good. Drew Phillips looked good. Okereke looked good. Like the whole defense. The whole defense looks good. The framework is there. We just need a new quarterback, a cornerback 2 that's on par or better than Tay, and I think we're going to be in a good spot.
Yeah, it's getting there. And Lee's comment here, I think, is speaking to Bryce Young. I don't know if I'd like the Bryce Young specific fit, but I would be intrigued to see them do what you said though, and trade something for, especially if maybe you don't like this class particularly, or maybe you rattle off a few and you do finish outside the top 5. You don't really want to dip into the war chest for a trade up. Maybe you can't budge the Panthers off that number 1 pick or whatever the case may be. I would be interested to see them trade for a developmental guy, even if it's not Bryce Young. Off the top of my head, I don't know who that would be. I wouldn't hate to see Bryce Young in Miami for a little bit, because that's almost an offense I think he could do some damage in, just with the speed on the outside and McDaniel kind of, putting the ball on the tee for him with the play calls. He might be able to survive out there, to be honest, and be a relatively cheap option for them to bridge, if nothing else. But I like where you're going, though, with getting some sort of secondary developmental quarterback in New York, and maybe it's like a Baker-esque cast-off situation, or a Darnold-esque cast-off situation, where you'll have them coming into a situation where, too, especially after another off season, where they're going to have pretty significant cap space. You can add more weaponry around Malik Neighbors, who looks like a true number one. Bellinger is a solid tight end. Again, Wandale's that young gadget piece. And there's really, really high level pieces on the defense, just with some holes at some starting positions. So you could see this roster round out pretty quickly and be ready for a quarterback to actually take the reins and make a little bit of noise. So I like where you're going with that one. It may just be an unfortunate season if things keep up the way they have. But you're right. Daniel Jones looked much better against Dan Quinn's Commanders defense than he did Brian Flores's Vikings defense. But that's to be expected. I mean, it's Brian. We talked about just this juggernaut unit in Minnesota. So that's, give them some slack there for sure.
If I was to paint my ideal route for the quarterback situation, it would be, don't go for a guy in this class. Get Jones off his contract. Let Drew Lock walk. That's fine. Keep DeVito, who looked solid last year. Maybe trade for a cheap developmental project. And then maybe if you want to go for Arch Manning the following year in the offseason, maybe just sign like Jameis Winston to a 1-year deal, or someone who's not going to command a lot of cap space or want like a incredibly long contract, but someone who can still go out there, win you games, things like that. So
Jameis is a good call out. That'd be a fun one. Yeah, exactly. Like a guy who can start, and maybe you just got to get him in a fresh situation with a good play caller, and some young hungry weapons around him. I think you could make something similar to what happened in Tampa Bay, similar to what's going on in Minnesota, similar to what you've seen in even in Pittsburgh over the last couple of years, where play calling's been rough, sure, but supporting cast and defense and coaching have been largely pretty strong. And actually, you know what? If you guys want to pay Darnold, all we're trying to do this year is get Darnold paid, but not by us. So you guys can go ahead perfectly. Lee's got this.
I'm good.
He's way ahead of me.
We've seen how he performs in New York. I think I'm good off of that one.
Actually, you're right. The he shouldn't take up another residency over there. You're probably right.
Yeah.
Well, sounds good, man. Well, sweet. Thanks for jumping on the show. We'll be back next week, folks. Keebler, let the folks know where else they can keep up with you before we get out of here.
NBA season's ramping up, so I'm going to get my Twitter started back up relatively soon. I've been tweeting a couple just jokes here and there, but when it comes time for it, probably I'd say October 1st-ish, I could probably get back to it pretty confidently. Preseason's around the middle of October. I think the first game's around October 21st. Somewhere in that range. So
around Halloween, yeah.
On Twitter, it'll be the Knicks stop right here. As you can tell, that's my Giants record prediction right there. But yeah, where can we find you, John?
Yeah, man. Here every Tuesday, of course. You can find all my written work at zonecoverage.com covering the Vikings. Got a big old Flores tape study coming out. Hopefully Thursday morning that'll run. Charting's done. I just got to put pen to paper a little bit here. And then also you'll see me every once in a while on Minnesota Sports Talk on YouTube or GG Sports Podcast. We've got a flurry of shows. We just had Skullfest this past weekend. Was a big Vikings home opener event that myself and some other Vikings content creators put together at a bar. We had about 200 Vikings fans that came through. We did a little bit of a live prediction show. And we'll be doing that every year. We had a videographer there, so the video for that should be coming out pretty soon. Should be pretty cool. Outside of that, yeah, written stuff, zone coverage. If you tuned into the show, please leave a like on your way out. Leave a comment after the stream ends even. That'll juice the numbers for us, help that algorithm. If you haven't subscribed yet, if you haven't subscribed already, we are almost to 700 subscribers. Big goal of 1,000 subscribers is right around the corner as well. So if you could help us out there, that would be much appreciated. You'll catch myself and at least Ben. You'll see a little bit of Keebler. You'll see a little bit of Kev as well. And then the rest of the week on the channel here, you'll see another damn fantasy podcast tomorrow night from our good friends Trevor and Josh. They're talking everything fantasy football as well as, you know, plenty of chatter about the past week, much like this show. And on Thursdays, you'll see Kev and James on Supersize Sports, which in the interim of the NBA season, they just cover everything in the sporting world, keep you up to date. Have a good time in the chat over there as well. They are a blast, and that show will turn into or back into the bounce right around the time Keebler's Twitter really starts to pop off. So stay tuned for that as well. Thanks so much for tuning in and still being here. If you are, I commend you for that. We'll be right back here next week at Tuesday, 9/8 Central for another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on Bite Size Sports.